There's a moment in every trader's life when a position stops being just a trade and starts becoming a part of who they are. You watch the screen. You feel every tick, every candle. You tell yourself it's strategy, but deep down, you know it's attachment. You hold not because it's right, but because letting go feels like losing a piece of yourself. This is the hidden psychology that destroys more traders than bad analysis ever could. It's not fear, it's not greed, it's the quiet illusion that what you own defines your worth. This is the endowment effect, the invisible thread that ties your identity to your positions. And until you learn to cut that thread, you'll never trade with true freedom. Welcome to Mind Over Markets. There's a moment every trader faces, a moment when the chart stops being numbers and lines and becomes something far more personal. You stare at a position that's gone red. You tell yourself it's temporary. You say it'll come back. But deep down, you feel the quiet weight of resistance, not against the market, but against yourself. I know that moment. I've lived in it. It's when a trade ceases to be a trade and becomes a reflection of who you are. That's the endowment effect. The subtle illusion that what we own has more value simply because it's ours. In the markets, it's poison wrapped in comfort. We buy a stock, a coin, a currency pair, and suddenly it's ours. Our analysis, our conviction, our baby. And when price moves against us, we don't just see loss on the screen, we feel rejection in the soul. You see, the endowment effect isn't about greed, it's about identity. The mind whispers, if I cut this position, I admit I was wrong. And the ego trembles at the idea of being wrong. So we hold, we justify, we defend. I remember one position, small in size but massive in weight. I watched it drift lower each hour. I knew the plan said exit at support break, but my mind said wait, it's just a pullback. Days later, it wasn't a pullback. It was denial. The truth is, every trade we open becomes a mirror. It shows us what we value more, being right or being free. The endowment effect feeds on our need for ownership, our craving to make sense of chaos by saying this is mine, but nothing in the market is truly ours, not the profits, not the setups, not even the certainty we think we have. Each candle that prints is a reminder that control is an illusion. The market moves where it wants. We only decide how long we're willing to stay attached to our illusion. I used to think detachment meant apathy, that to be calm I had to stop caring. But I learned detachment is not indifference. It's clarity. It's the space between stimulus and response, between emotion and decision. When you let go of a losing position, you're not giving up. You're releasing a burden that was never meant to define you. You're admitting that your value as a trader is not measured by a single trade, but by your ability to move on. Most traders lose not because their strategy is bad, but because they confuse identity with position. They become their trades. And when the trade dies, they die a little with it. But the market doesn't care who you are. It only mirrors you. Your fear, your hope, your unwillingness to let go. The first step to freedom is awareness. To look at your screen and say, this is just data. This is not me. That realization changes everything. When I finally learned to look at the market without expectation, I realized how long I had lived as a prisoner of my own positions. I thought I was trading charts, but I was really trading my self-worth. Each candle, each tick felt like it was judging me, approving when I was right, humiliating when I was wrong. The longer I stayed in this cycle, the heavier every decision became, because every position carried not only money, but memory. The moment I pressed buy, I was no longer neutral. My perception shifted. I began to filter information to see only what supported my bias. I stopped being a trader and became a believer. That's what attachment does. It blinds you to truth. It makes you fall in love with a story, and when the story starts to break, you defend it instead of questioning it. You fight reality, and reality always wins. There's a quiet arrogance hidden inside the endowment effect. It whispers, "I know better than the market." It convinces you that patience is the same as denial. You call it conviction, but what it really is fear. Fear of loss, fear of being wrong, fear of letting go of something that once felt certain. I've watched traders destroy themselves chasing the ghost of what once was. They stare at the red numbers not out of hope, but out of nostalgia, remembering the moment when that trade looked perfect. They want to feel that confidence again, but the market doesn't care about your memories. It only responds to your presence in the now. When you hold a position too long, you don't just lose money, you lose time focus and emotional balance. Every minute you spend defending a bad position is a minute stolen from clarity, and clarity is your most valuable capital. I remember closing a trade, once a big loss. My hand trembled, not because of the numbers, but because I felt like I was betraying myself. I had built a narrative around that trade, and when I hit close, it felt like erasing part of my identity. But the moment the order disappeared, something else appeared: silence. A strange peace I hadn't felt in weeks. It was like finally exhaling after holding my breath underwater. That's when I understood letting go is not weakness. It's maturity. It's trusting that who you are is greater than any single decision you've made. Every position you open is a relationship between you and uncertainty. It begins with excitement, grows with hope, and if you're not careful, ends in heartbreak. You can't control the market, but you can control the depth of your attachment. The less you need to be right, the freer you become. Think of the mind as a container. When it's filled with unresolved trades with emotional baggage from past losses, there's no room for new insight. Attachment clutters awareness. It makes you react instead of respond. But when you release those weights, your perception sharpens. You start to see the market not as a threat, but as a mirror. In that mirror, you don't find forecasts, you find yourself. You see your patterns, your triggers, your illusions. You realize that trading was never about predicting price, it was about mastering reaction. So when you catch yourself holding on too tightly, pause. Ask, if I didn't already own this position, would I still want it? That single question has saved me more times than any indicator, because it forces honesty. It cuts through bias. It brings you back to neutrality, the state where real decisions are made. The market rewards clarity, not attachment. It honors discipline, not devotion. And yet most traders worship their own analysis like a fragile belief system. They build temples around their trades and call it confidence. But confidence that can't survive contradiction is not confidence. It's illusion. To grow as a trader, you must learn the art of graceful surrender, the ability to say, "This one isn't mine anymore," and move on. Not bitterly, not fearfully, but consciously. Every time you let go of a position that no longer serves you, you strengthen the muscle of detachment. That muscle is what keeps you alive in the long run. Because in the end, trading isn't a battle against the market. It's a conversation with yourself. And until you stop clinging to every position like it defines you, you'll never hear what that conversation is truly saying. There comes a point in every trader's journey when you realize the real market is not out there. It's inside you. You stop blaming volatility algorithms or news headlines and begin to see that the true battle has always been between your logic and your attachment. I remember when I first started practicing detachment. It wasn't easy. Every time I tried to let go of a trade, a quiet voice inside whispered, "What if it turns around the moment you exit?" And sometimes it did. I would close a losing position only to watch the market reverse minutes later. It used to torture me. I would sit there staring at the chart, convincing myself that I was cursed. But over time, I learned something profound. That pain wasn't the market punishing me. It was me refusing to accept uncertainty. I wanted control, the one thing the market would never give. The truth is, detachment doesn't mean you stop caring about outcomes. It means you stop trying to control them. You begin to trade from a place of observation, not obsession. You act when the probabilities align, and you release when they don't. At first, this feels cold. It feels mechanical. You think if I detach, I'll lose my edge, my intuition. But detachment doesn't kill intuition, it refines it. It clears the fog of emotion so that your intuition can actually breathe. In time, I noticed something change. When I lost a trade, I didn't feel that old sting of humiliation. There was a calmness, a quiet voice that said, "Next." It wasn't indifference, it was acceptance. And with acceptance came clarity. The charts started to look different, not because they had changed, but because I had. Where I once saw threats, I began to see information. Where I once felt tension, I found rhythm. It was as if the market had always been speaking softly, but my attachment had made me deaf. Detachment opens your ears to truth. It lets you see what the market is trying to teach you instead of what you want it to say. You begin to understand that every trade is a teacher. The losing trades show you where you resist reality. The winning trades show you how to follow flow. Both are valuable if you have the humility to listen. That humility updates everything, because attachment is born from ego, and ego thrives on the illusion of control. When you let go of ego, you stop needing to be right and start wanting to understand. That's when trading transforms from a chase into a practice. It becomes meditation in motion. Each entry, each exit is a breath inhale, exhale, rhythm. You start to measure success not by profits, but by presence. How centered were you when you made that decision? How aware were you of your own emotions at that moment? This awareness is the invisible edge, the one no system can replicate. Because the market is not a puzzle to be solved, it's a mirror to be understood. And when you meet that mirror with clarity instead of attachment, you stop reacting and start responding. You'll notice it in the small things first. You'll check your open positions and feel no rush of pride or panic. You'll set a stop loss and actually honor it. You'll wake up after a losing day and not feel the urge to make it back. You'll simply return present, curious, calm. That's the mind of a professional. Not emotionless, but emotionally aware. Not rigid, but responsive. Free, yet disciplined. The irony of it all is that when you stop needing the market to validate you, it begins to reward you. Not because the market suddenly becomes easier, but because you become quieter. You stop forcing trades that don't exist. You stop defending positions that don't deserve protection. And in that stillness, opportunity appears. I often tell traders the goal is not to conquer the market. The goal is to stop letting the market conquer you. Every time you detach from a position that no longer serves you, you reclaim energy. Energy that can be invested in clarity, patience, creativity. And one day, without even realizing it, you'll look back and see how far you've come. You'll remember the days when a red candle could ruin your mood, when a small loss felt like failure. You'll smile not with arrogance, but with understanding, because you'll know that those moments were never about money. They were about identity and growth. That's the gift hidden inside every loss, the invitation to know yourself better. The endowment effect teaches attachment. The market teaches surrender. And surrender, in its purest form, is freedom. When you reach that point when you can say, "I don't need this trade to be right," you begin to trade with grace. You begin to flow with the market, not against it. You start to see that each position is temporary, but your awareness is permanent. You are not your trades. You are the space between them. And in that space lives your true edge, still calm, timeless. There is a quiet moment after every deep lesson, a silence that follows realization. It's not the silence of emptiness, but of understanding. And in that silence, you begin to see that trading was never just about charts or systems or timing. It was always about awareness. Awareness of who you become when the market tests you. Awareness of how quickly your peace depends on numbers that were never yours to control. Awareness that attachment is not limited to positions. It seeps into every part of life. The same mind that clings to a losing trade clings to opinions, relationships, and versions of itself that no longer serve. We build these small fortresses of identity and we defend them fiercely, forgetting that growth cannot happen within walls. The market simply exposes this truth faster. It compresses time and ego into a single decision. Will you let go, or will you hold on until it breaks you? I remember once mentoring a young trader. He was talented, sharp, with numbers, disciplined with analysis. But every time a trade went against him, he froze. He couldn't cut it. He said, "It feels like I'm abandoning it too soon." And I told him, "You're not abandoning the trade. You're abandoning your illusion of control." He didn't understand then, but months later he came back and said, "I finally cut a losing trade without hesitation. It wasn't the loss that changed me, it was the peace that followed." That's when I knew he had crossed a line invisible to most. Because once you experience peace after surrender, you never trade the same way again. You stop chasing validation. You stop needing to win every time. You start to see losing not as failure, but as feedback. That shift is everything. It's the difference between reacting and reflecting, between chaos and composure. In that space, humility is born. You begin to see how small you are compared to the vastness of the market, and instead of feeling insignificant, you feel grateful. Grateful to participate, to learn to observe. Grateful that you can make mistakes and still be given another chance to try again. Humility doesn't weaken a trader, it refines one. It dissolves the illusion that mastery means control. True mastery is awareness without attachment. It's knowing that you can do everything right and still lose a trade, and yet remain calm, centered, whole. Because when you are no longer attached to outcome, you begin to trade from integrity. You follow your plan because it's right, not because it guarantees profit. You manage risk because you respect uncertainty, not because you fear it. You wait because patience feels natural, not forced. This is the paradox of detachment. The less you cling, the more clearly you see. And when you see clearly, you align with the rhythm of the market, a rhythm that rewards balance, not emotion. Sometimes I step back and think about all the traders who quit not because they lacked knowledge, but because they never learned how to let go. They fought too long against reality, burned too much energy defending wrong positions, and eventually lost faith, not in the market, but in themselves. They didn't need a new strategy. They needed silence. They needed a moment to pause, to breathe, to see that the voice screaming inside them wasn't intuition, it was attachment. When you quiet that voice, something beautiful happens. You rediscover curiosity. You begin to ask, not how can I win, but what can I learn here? You realize that every candle, every move, every loss is a teacher if you're humble enough to listen. And slowly trading stops feeling like survival. It starts to feel like dialogue, a conversation between your discipline and the market's truth. Some days you speak, other days you listen. And the more you listen, the wiser you become. I once thought success meant financial freedom. Now I see it differently. Success is emotional freedom, The ability to face the unknown without fear, to take a loss without self-destruction, to act without needing to prove anything to anyone. When you reach that place, trading becomes simple again. You enter, you exit, you observe. No story, no ego, no noise. Just flow. That's the real profit, the one you can't measure in currency, the profit of peace. Because at the end of the day, money can fluctuate, but presence once found is priceless. So the next time you feel that urge to defend a position, pause. Breathe. Remember, you are not your trade. You are the awareness watching it unfold. Let go. Return to center. And trade not to prove yourself right, but to practice being free. There comes a quiet dawn after the storm, when the charts still move, the candles still breathe, and yet something inside you no longer shakes. That's when you know the lesson has settled. The market didn't change, you did. You start to see your trades the way an artist sees sketches. Each one part of a larger work, imperfect, temporary, necessary. You stop demanding that every stroke be perfect because you've learned that perfection isn't truth. Awareness is. You begin to meet losses with respect, wins with humility, and uncertainty with patience. That's when trading becomes more than a profession. It becomes a mirror for the self. Every time you open a position now, you do it with softness. You acknowledge risk not as an enemy, but as a companion that keeps you honest. You no longer pray for profit, you simply prepare for possibility. You realize that the endowment effect was never about the trade. It was about the fear of emptiness, the fear of who you might be without that attachment. And when you finally learn to sit with that emptiness, you discover it isn't emptiness at all. It's space. It's freedom. Freedom to enter without obsession. Freedom to exit without regret. Freedom to see clearly, act deliberately, and walk away gracefully. You start to notice this clarity spill into the rest of your life. You detach not just from trades, but from the need to be constantly right. You listen more, speak less. You find comfort in not knowing because you've learned that control was never power, awareness is. You stop judging yourself by your P&L and start judging yourself by your peace. You begin to ask different questions. Not did I win, but did I stay disciplined? Not was I right, but was I present? Those are the questions that build longevity. Those are the questions that shape mastery. When you reach this level of consciousness, trading becomes a spiritual act. Every click, every decision, a test of patience, humility, and detachment. It's no longer about conquering the market. It's about aligning with it, becoming part of its rhythm, learning its language of impermanence. You realize that the market has always been your greatest teacher. It breaks your pride when it grows too loud. It humbles your certainty when it becomes too rigid. And it rewards you not for prediction but for surrender. To trade without attachment is to love the process more than the result. To accept that you will lose many times, but each loss will leave you wiser. And that wisdom, if protected, compounds faster than any account ever could. There's a peace that arrives when you stop fighting what is. When you understand that letting go is not the end of something, it's the beginning of seeing clearly. You don't need to know what happens next. You just need to stay awake enough to respond when it comes. The endowment effect still whispers sometimes. It still tries to convince me that my trades are part of me. But now I smile when I hear it. Because I know the truth, the only thing I truly own in this market is my state of mind. Everything else, the profits, the positions, the predictions, are temporary visitors. They come and go like tides. But awareness stays. So I trade with gratitude. Grateful for every opportunity to practice patience. Grateful for every loss that reminds me of balance. Grateful for every win that tests my humility. And when I close the screens at the end of the day, I no longer feel the noise echoing in my mind. There's only quiet. And in that quiet, I find what I was searching for all along. Not certainty, not control, but peace. Because the real victory was never in beating the market. It was in mastering myself. The market is a mirror. It reflects not your skill, but your state of mind. Every chart you study, every trade you take is another chance to see yourself more clearly. When you let go of attachment, you don't lose your edge, you rediscover it. You stop chasing certainty and start cultivating peace. Because real mastery was never about predicting the next move. It was about staying present for this one. So close your charts, breathe, and remember, you are not your trades. You are the awareness behind them. This is Mind Over Markets, where psychology meets performance, and every loss is just another step toward freedom.